I have been calling in community my whole life because I know that I know its value. I know how much more is done when done together. And I know because it like kind of makes me tear up. I know what it is to live alone, and I know we're not meant to. We are meant to spend time alone, but there can be too much for sure. And so, I didn't even know this was going to bubble up. This is wonderful. This is wonderful and beautiful. I'm so grateful for it.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful souls, to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. I am your host, Harrison, and once as always, twice as always, three times as always, it's going to keep going. The number's going to keep going up. I'm here as usual with another beautiful guest for you and another beautiful conversation. And before I introduce this powerful woman, I want to thank all of you that have been listening to these episodes. I've just started this journey, and I was just reflecting before I got on the call with my guest today that to me, it's a beautiful representation of one, my love, but two, the beautiful beings in my life. And speaking of beautiful beings in my life, Lindsaya Vandeusen is a powerful wellness warrior. She's a powerful holistic mama. She is a beauty and wellness specialist and strategist. But as the theme is on this podcast, she is so much more than that. And if I'm going to sort of land with something here, we want to show up in this world from a place of love and a place of, natural healing in many ways. And the word that bubbles up for me around Lindsaya is activism in many ways, loving and powerful activism. So that's really the theme and the energy that I want to share with you today. Lindsaya, my beautiful friend, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thank you for having me. It feels cosmic in energy, Harrison. And you are such an antenna of love. So thank you so much for having me here and inviting me onto your platform, into the beautiful realm in which I know you are going to make just an even greater impact than you already do. And just watching you bring your light forward and all the ways in which you work. So I'm just so grateful to be here. Thanks for asking me, and I'll hand it to you and be guided, and happy to share all that you would like to uncover today.
Yeah. And I'm just, again, I'm grateful, Lindsaya, that one, that I got to meet you, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about this today, but two, that my loving light was attracted to your loving light. And that's really what like I said in the intro just now, that's what I want to share with the people listening. Because a lot of people may have been following me before. Maybe they've seen your face on the promotion. They, I want to hear more of her voice. So let's dig into that. Let's dig into who the beautiful being who Lindsaya is. And I want to start, as I always do, spending a bit of time going back into your past, right? Because yes, our stories don't need to define us. We need to ground ourselves in the present so we can step forward and going into the future. But our past does mold a big part of who we are, right? And if we can reflect, if we can look back, if we can share those stories, then maybe we can shift someone else's perspective and realize that one, they have power inside of them. And two, if that person can walk this path, so can I. So I'd love to hear, Lindsaya, maybe a little bit about what has led you to being this beautiful shining light that you are in this world today.
That's no small question. There's a lot that's led to.
Let me make it a bit more simpler for you, because I forget sometimes that I go a bit deep for people, and maybe you're not there yet with me, and that's all good. Maybe share, a lot of the work that you do in this world is around wellness, is around beauty, is around holistic and natural healing. Tell me about your history in the beauty industry. Tell me about how sort of plant-based living came into all of that, some of those elements.
Really, in terms of my journey, I am an only child. I had a single mom almost my entire life. She was married for a short period. And the truth is that I was a really picky eater. My grandma would just say, like, let her eat whatever she wants. She's not going to die if she's eating fish sticks for 2 years, or, Velveeta and white bread and mayonnaise and mustard sandwiches for years. And I think the reality is, like, my mom was working really hard and she was doing the best that she could. But the food that was and was not on my plate led to all my ailments, everything from asthma to eczema to migraines to depression and more. And I know that now. I place no blame on my mom. Gut health is really a new science in the world of sciences. And so that was my upbringing. I have a 17-year-old daughter. And when she was in my womb and I learned I was having a little girl, there just was this deep knowing that I did not want to pass on so many parts of what I had walked through.
I've listened to little bits of your story in other platforms where I get to listen to your voice and your beautiful light and shining it to all the people in your community. And correct me if I'm wrong, but before you had your children, you had some challenges in getting pregnant, correct?
It was in between my 2 pregnancies that I had infertility issues. So my first pregnancy was really unplanned and not at a time in which I would have been seeking that out in life. And that's when I found myself in that vulnerable state of being a younger mom than I ever planned. I mean, quite frankly, at that point, I was 20 years old. I wasn't even considering being a mom. It really wasn't, I wasn't thinking of it in a serious way. And so, but in just a few short months, learning that I was going to be the mom of a daughter who then 1 month later, after learned she would be a single mom, walked into motherhood alone. And that was a big concern of repeat. And that we could break the chains, that we could break the cycle together, and that I could do something different. And that there was more than what I knew in the way that I walked. And that was where it began.
Thank you for sharing that, Lindsaya. And it's interesting seeing where you're at now, right? And I want to get to some of these pieces in a bit here. But it's interesting to see where you're at now in terms of the types of things that you promote through nutrition, through the soil, through gardening, through your healthy beauty products. When you were sort of moving through that transition of creating life and learning lessons, where did those elements, that education or maybe lack of education at that point in time, where did that factor into things? Did it come in hard and fast? Were you aware of, like, for example, what you were putting in your body and how that created the fertile soil internally for something to be built? Was that going through your mind in terms of being a mama that wants to give birth?
Nothing. I had no understanding of the soil 18 years ago, not even a smidge on my radar outside of, I knew I didn't want to mess with it. So that's it. At that point in my life, my understanding of nutrition was, I was absent of any real education, real understanding outside of, I didn't like the way that I felt or looked. It's not simply about outward appearance. I didn't feel good. And I now look back and there were a lot of things in relationships. So no, to me, it was, I really wanted to do better by my daughter. I happened to go to a grocery store, which had a invitation to a chiropractor and naturopath in a local city. And I went to that presentation and I walked out feeling like the dumbest person in the world because I was so far from every single thing that they said. And I just started doing one thing at a time. And that's really where it began 18 years ago.
So you're feeding my curiosity here, Lindsay, and I'm putting some, I already know a lot about you, and I'm hearing your pieces of this story now that are actually new to me. And I'm trying to, like, in my little mind, put little dots together and pull strings together. You are a beautiful friend in my life that really promotes this idea of plant forward eating, right? Really not just plant based, but plant forward eating. where in this timeline of events, and I want to pull this out just for people for listening, because I know that as we are expanding and developing our relationship with food, that is probably the most, this is in my experience, Lindsay, I don't know about you, but that's probably the most fluctuating element in our evolution, right? Our relationship to food and how much it differs and changes all the time. So I'm wondering for you, Lindsay, where in this story did this idea and promotion and highlight really of plant-based, plant-forward eating come into your world?
So I don't know the year exactly, but I'll be really honest. I started working with the Juice Plus company. I brought them into my life for nutrition for our family. That was like a really key thing. And when I learned about, dehydrated produce and the power of all of that, that was something that had I knew that there were holes and could see the rotation and what my babies were consuming. And then there was a real positive result. And I'm not saying that would be for everybody, but there was a real positive result in our family. And that positive was like, if the encapsulated produce can do this, what in the hell could the real thing do? And more of it, and how much of it, and what kind of variety. And it just started to unpack and awaken all of that inside of me.
So let's go down this little rabbit hole, Lindsaya, and I think this is probably the place where we first bonded. I think this is the little bit of your being that really pulled me to you at first, and since then, obviously, our relationship has gotten deeper in many other ways. But just for people listening, a big part of this podcast, a big part of the cosmic love transformation that I try to promote is we want to connect inwards to our love frequency, so then we can share it outwards and spread it into the world and bring in, healing, bring in relationships, bring in abundance. And one of the core pillars of this transformation is nutrition, is our relationship with food and more importantly, the alive food. So you have something that you like to repeat, Lindsaya, and it's this idea of good, better, best. And I know that you apply it mostly, and correct me if I'm wrong, with this relationship with food, with this relationship of going out and sourcing good quality nutrients through food to bring into your world. So maybe let's go down that direction and share where did this sort of idea in your mind begin, this saying, and two, what do you think is the importance of it?
So good, better, best gave me that opportunity to have that sliding spectrum and to think of it as, what is it in this moment that best serves whatever it is, that's my objective. And so nutritionally, that can be applied in a business sense, in my sleeping schedule, however you think of it. What is that next thing to move that scale in a positive direction? And so good, better, best to me also is, a way where we can categorize food that we often see in our lives. And so it can give better clarity to, yes, good food in terms of the way things are grown. So that's really when I talk about good, better, best in terms of a soil application, because again, it can be applied to any model that we're looking at. And so when we think about soil, good, better, best really becomes how we shop, how we choose the food that we're sourcing, and why that matters, and what the practices are, and what we're missing in food that would be considered good versus what is applied and what is contained and maintained, more importantly, and food that's better. And then when we really get to the best, this is when we're in harmony with great Mother Earth. This is when we're truly enacting what it means to be a global participant in this, in the shared space. And so to me, that's best. And that's where we're shooting for in our objective when we're, consuming anything, if we can come from that perspective.
Ooh, so you're getting me going, Lindsay. There's some things bubbling up here that I want to break down. So let's use this structure. Let's use this framework. Let's use this good, better, best, and give me some examples, Lindsay. And I think and then we'll break down different layers from here. So what if I'm a consumer, I'm listening to this and I'm interested, okay, I want to start bringing some better quality food into my life and I want to apply this good, better, best framework. What are some examples of some food products that you would categorize in good, better, and then best, just to get this ball rolling?
Yeah. So for me, good is going to be anything that is plant food. That's going to be like plant food across the board, clean it, consume more of it, of all kinds of varieties. Because I'm plant forward. So that's really where I'm pushing. So of course, this can also be food derived from plants. We can talk about some packaged foods, of course, in this situation. And we're going to talk about labeling. So in a good situation, we're going to have something that is non-GMO and is going to be gluten-free. That will tend to get us in a better direction on labeling. It is not a confirmation of healthy food, but it moves us in that better direction.
Let me cut in there. Sorry to interrupt. So just to make this very clear for someone, a good item could still be something that's packaged, right? Could still be something that is in a packet, but maybe in your structure, it's still formed from plant-based products.
That can look a little different in other countries. I know you're in Australia, so your labeling may be different. And then when we move into best, we're looking at something that now we're looking for organic. We're looking for organic produce. We're really, ideally, I'm never promoting packaged food. So we just simply say, if you're going to buy packaged, now at this point, it's going to be organic only labeling. That's really going to be in the good, where we're looking for minimally processed. Again, all of the previous sections still applies. So you don't lose any of those labels. And then the best, it's really food without a label. It's organic, hopefully regeneratively grown food without the need for labeling, and really without the need for much preparation. And so that tends to be a lot of plant foods. I leave the spectrum open for people because I believe in bio-individuality. I also don't believe that everyone has to live identically, but I do believe that plants are the most powerful in healing. And so that's what I like to really share.
I want people to, first of all, there's a few things that I want people to take from this. First of all, the idea of how most of our ancestors, right? And we could have a conversation about animal products, and maybe that's another type of episode we could do. But I just want to take the plant perspective into this, and just the detoxification power of them, right? Most of us, if we're not eating in that best category of a live food, like, just to be fully transparent, there's nothing in my fridge now that lasts over a week, right? If I don't clean out that fridge, then things are going to start going off. And that's what Lindsaya is talking about, meaning that alive foods, they're alive, and packaged foods, they're dead most of the time, right? So it's that vitality that gives us the life force inside of us. But going back to the detoxification element, if we are eating lower on that scale, and this is not a shame or a guilt thing, you do what you need to do, and you're constantly working yourself up, right? I know that's a big part of what you teach, Lindsaya. But I just want to make this very clear. If you are eating lower on that scale, there is going to be a need for your systems to recover. There is going to be a need for your systems to need some vitality to help break down the things that are being constantly being bombarded from the external world. Plants do that. Plants are the most powerful detoxification element, item, superpower that we all have access to. So just from that lens alone, you need more plants in your life. Lindsaya, does that resonate? Do you agree with that? Do you want to add anything to that?
No, 100%. And it was with vibration and with food. When I think of good, better, best, that's really how I envision it. You know, when I'm looking at a food, like, what is the vibrational essence of this food? And so again, if not everyone is tapped into energy and feeling it, we all have it. We all have the ability to feel it and be in tune with it, but not everyone has flexed that muscle essentially and practiced. But for those that are energetically in tune, I say, go to your grocery store and play a game and have someone put a conventional tomato in your hand and an organic tomato, and then go to the farmer's market and feel the vibration of that food. Like it's totally different. It's totally different. So that's really what I advocate for,
Like that, this little piece alone, Lindsaya, we could do a whole episode on. I might have to bring you back for it. But the vibrancy and our ability to connect into the energetics of food. I want to maybe try to explain this for new people to this, because I know people that follow my voice or follow your voice, Lindsay, that might be in tune with this kind of energetic conversation. But there's also a lot of new people listening. And I can feel your skepticism, right? I can feel your skepticism around there's no such thing as this energetic nature of reality and food. But I just want have an open heart, have an open mind. You don't have to believe us. I don't ever expect anyone to believe anything I say. And I'm sure you're the same, Lindsay. I prefer you to implement it in your life and to see how it manifests for you. But realize that the healthier we are, the more attuned our vibrancy, the more attuned our frequency, right? This is why I talk about the cosmic love antenna, right? Because the more that we go inwards with our self-love, in this case with food, right, the more our frequency is able to expand, right? I just gave this example this morning, Lindsay, and maybe I've shared it with you probably in a room, about the Heart Math Institute, right? How the heart has a electromagnetic frequency, right? And if we spend time in the heart space and opening that up, that frequency radiates outwards, right? So I share that example to help people listening around this relationship with food and its vibration, is that it's a very real thing, right? And if you go down this rabbit hole, it'll take you to a very deep place. Do I sound crazy, Lindsay, or does that resonate?
No. Oh my gosh, it resonates. So yes, you and I, we've been in conversation and we've absolutely shared in this mutual affinity to this deep understanding, because we've experienced it, we've witnessed it in others as it happens with them. There is, and I also say, we need nothing more than to be able to envision if you had a glass of water and you started sprinkling in anything, right? Like you will change the pH based on what you're putting into it. And we can envision that, and yet somehow get disconnected to the idea that the same thing is like what we're putting in, we become. Like it's not, there's no difference to, like, if this cup of water, if I start putting something in, it will become that. And whatever I am putting in, I will become. And so there's a vibration to all food sources, no matter what, like where the source is. And to me, the idea is to serve our highest vibration by putting in the highest vibrational food.
If people are interested in this and you're listening to Lindsay, you're like, I still don't, I feel her heart. I'm connecting to her beautiful voice, but there's still something that's very skeptical. A resource I would encourage you to go down is Hidden Messages in Water by, I think, Masaru Emoto. I think he's the author and the scientist behind it. And in that book, in that resource, there are studies now showing this man did an experiment with a jug of water. And they took screenshots of the molecular structure of that water just in the tub, and then they took screenshots of the water in the tub when they pasted a piece of paper on the outside with the words "I love you" on it, and they looked at the molecular structure and how it changed purely with the intention of the words that were around the water itself, and the structure of the water changed from a very disjointed and disformed structure to a also almost snowflake-like beautiful, structure of love in many ways. And if that doesn't get you going around this relationship with food, remember what is produce? It's mostly water. What is us? Mostly water. If that doesn't explain it, I'm not sure what does. So I want to shift gears here now a little bit, Lindsaya, and I want to ask you about something you mentioned before. And I know this is something that you're also very passionate about, and it's this relationship with the soil itself. So we were talking about good, better, best. And at the end of your scale, you talked about organic and even biodynamic farming. And for a lot of people listening, these might be, I mean, I'm sure most of us are familiar with organic, but I'd love to throw to you, Lindsay, to maybe explain, one, what does organic really mean? And two, how does the soil play a role in the vitality of the things that we're putting into our body?
Yeah. So organic isn't a perfect label, but it's the best opportunity out there as really to ensure that we're consuming less chemicals. And so organic means what is allowed to be done to the soil, that if the seed is not allowed to be genetically modified, if it's organic produce, and then what chemicals are allowed to be in contact with that produce while it's growing. So again, it's not a perfect system, but it is a better system. But it can also, the truth is like anything, if not done in harmony with the earth, it can actually still have detrimental effects, both on the nutrients in the soil and thus the nutrients in the food. And so really what is the beauty of gardening or farming, the way that we're in harmony and we create this nutritionally optimal food, which is high vibration, is by having a lot of life in the soil, not the dirt. And so it's around respecting the dirt as really like we would our own gut health. I always say the soil is the microbiota. That's where the microbiota of Mother Earth lives. And so when we think about, what is the life within which this life is emerging, the plant that we're consuming, we want that to be nutrient rich and diverse. And, and the soil needs to be, there's a lot that goes into it, and it isn't a perfect science. Like there's always, what I've learned is like, as a gardener and farmer, you're just always learning. You're just learning the best because climate is changing, environment is changing. There are some things like I could never be USDA organic. I live too close to people who choose to, still spray True Green on their garden or on their grass. And so there's some things that are uncontrollable.
Let me jump in there. What is True Green? True Green is Roundup.
It's like Roundup. Well, so a lot of people don't think so, but it's like a lawn fertilizer. So a lot of people, we've come to believe that, as we moved from living in the country and farming and we became city dwellers, it became a sign of affluency to have a well-kept yard. Yep. And that well-kept yard has depleted the nutrients, AKA soil, making it virtually impossible to really have great gardening, and expose us to a whole lot of chemicals that then bleed into our waterways and more. So it's like all interconnected, and it's one big circle that you can't speak of one part without immediately bleeding into the next because it's so connected.
So, so much here. There's so much here. And there's 2 points, and I'm going to try and keep it short because we could go a whole other podcast on these little elements alone. But the first point I want to make sure people heard of what you just shared is the soil's role in the vitality of the produce that we eat. And you talked about the microbiota and the microorganisms in the soil and how that has a direct impact of the microorganisms in us, right? And if you're new on this journey, you probably have some awareness of the microbiome that is in the stomach, right? We have many microbiomes, but the gut is probably the most popular at the moment. Our microbiome makeup inside of our gut that is important for our systemic health, one of the ways it is built is from the soil that our food is grown from. So I want to make this so clear. If we are eating produce that has been sprayed with chemicals that are there that destroy the bacterial diversity, all of it, right? Not just the bacteria, the fungal, the parasites. Remember, it's not about good or bad. It's about the balance. And if that balance is not there, then we're bringing in that imbalance into our system. And if our system is already imbalanced from all of the other reasons that the gut could be impacted, from stress, from sleep, from toxins, from all of the things, then now this produce that is, flawed. It's not, and let me, again, going back to your framework, Lindsaya, it's not about, you got to do the best that you can. So even non-organic produce still has value. I'm not taking away from that, but I'm just emphasizing, if you can go organic, you're really supporting that gut from many different ways, right? The other element that you said about the grass and the chemicals on the grass, I want people to realize this and maybe picture this, and maybe Lindsaya, I can get your thoughts on what you feel about this. Ask yourself the question, why in nature, why do pests, bacteria, fungal, parasites, why do they show up? Lindsaya, why do you think that they show up in nature?
Well, of course. All of those things show up in nature. There's a balance to everything. And so there's a reason why each thing shows up. But I will say, like, in gardening, it is not that you do that with no death. Like there are things that will eat your food if you don't remedy appropriately.
Well, this is the thing, Lindsaya, and this is what I want people to hear, is that there is a way to achieve that balance without the total destruction of everything. Right? So the parasites and the fungal and the pests, they show up, and our automatic response is poison and kill everything. So now the thing can grow. But we then forget about, okay, what have we destroyed in the process of getting rid of those pests for some time? And more importantly, and this brings us back to allopathic versus sort of holistic mindset. We've fixed the symptom, so we've fixed the pest that is showing up, but we're overlooking the root cause in which they're there in the first place. Am I making sense, Lindsaya?
Yeah, this is crop rotation.
Yeah.
This is, companion planting. This is, everything from, mending your soil with appropriately. There are so many holistic practices within gardening alone speak to exactly this. To, when done appropriately, there are actually, our ancestors had a lot of ways of creating and growing food without all of these chemicals, and still having and creating enough to survive and thrive. And so there are methods. And there's innovation as well. There are new things all of the time, but it's important for us to consider what we are doing in the larger impact. And so high vibrational food will be food that makes very little impact on the world around it while being grown, and gives back to the world in its demise. Like, that's going to be the highest vibrational consumption that there is.
And I think we're, us as a community, Lindsaya, with people like you in it especially, I think we're all, as a collective, we're shifting, right? This mindset is shifting. And I'm excited. I'm excited with where the world is going. I want to throw another question at you now, Lindsaya, and this is something that just popped into my head. And it actually, my dad, who is an avid listener of this podcast. Hi, Dad. Thank you for listening. I love you very much. He asked me a question the other day that I thought was very valid. That was a very valid question that, I had an answer for, but there was also something in it that I thought, okay, we need to have more discussion around this. And the question was, I was talking to him about organic versus non-organic produce. And he said to me, how do I know that organic label is real? How do I know that organic label is not just superficial and fake? I'm wondering, Lindsaya, what are your thoughts on this? What do you say to people that have this skepticism, some of it warranted, some of it not, but what is your response to people that come at it from that angle?
To expand on that best region, we are talking about, if you want to be certain that your food's label is accurate, it really is going to be more ideal than to shop as often as possible locally, knowing your farmer, having a relationship with, if you're not growing it, know the person who is growing it, because the reality is food is treated differently when it has to go into transportation. It's picked at a different time based on where it has to be transported to, And so the closer to home we're able to shop, the more we're able to buy our local produce from a regenerative or organic place, from a farmer's market where there isn't even a label, there's likely a sign. Because those labels, the thing that kills me is that the actual adhesive on the labels is toxic within itself on our organic produce. I'm like, put it on the conventional stuff. So, it's not a perfect system. With our organic produce at the store, we have a better chance because of the barcodes. They are supposed to be more trackable if you want to search them. Can we be certain 100% of the time? No, because human error does exist. But generally speaking, the produce won't even really look the same. So you can generally tell in that instance, there can, in many cases, be a different effect. The better is that organic produce, like I said, and then the best is going to be locally grown, regeneratively grown.
So it's interesting. And I love your response, Lindsaya, and I had a similar response. And I would add two things on top of this. One, I want to emphasize that communication piece that you just talked about. And even if it is, so obviously going local where that communication can be easy, but also calling them up, right? So calling up the certification, maybe getting aware of what it means to be certified, and just being that crazy person or that annoying person maybe at first that is asking, right? Because you're paying for these things. It's much like the health industry. We often forget our role, right? We feel like we're out of control in the process, but we're the paying customer. So call them, ask, what is certification? What does it mean? And test them is what I would do. I also want to emphasize the energetics of it again, right? So as you start getting more healthy, you're actually gets to the point where you can feel the difference, right? So you're not going to need to do this annoying part. You're actually going to know. I know for me now, and maybe Lindsay, you can relate to this. When I eat sort of the organic celery that I have versus the non-organic celery, I can taste it straight away, right? I can feel I can taste the substance in it in many ways. And I want to just emphasize that for people listening, is that is going to shift as well. Lindsaya, you've mentioned biodynamic and regenerative a couple times. And I think people listening to this still might have some idea of these words and some awareness. But do you want to break that down for maybe new people to this? What does it mean? We understand organic based off what we've been talking about thus far. But what is regenerative and biodynamic? What are those sort of those monikers and titles mean on a piece of produce?
Yeah. So biodynamic and regenerative are based on the continent. Those are interchangeable for a lot. So they mean one of the same. So just for many people that are listening, if you're unaware, but in terms of that, what that means is that plant was grown in what I call the highest consideration of harmony with its local environment. It was, what was taken into consideration was everything from the soil health to the health and the optimization of water resources, to using livestock appropriately, to do the tending or kneading or moving or fertilizing of the soil. And so it really is an ecology that if many of us really close our eyes, I tend to think, I don't know what your demographic is of your podcasts, but I tend to imagine that everyone here could close their eyes and see whatever was taught to you in elementary school that shows the life cycle of, which one do you want to choose? You want to choose the farm animal that they show the life cycle of how it eats the grass, poops on the grass, that, the grass then, grows better, has more grasshoppers, whatever again, depends on yours, but we can all see this life cycle. And that is what biodynamic means. It means you're looking at how can I be the least intrusive possible in this space while optimizing it to grow nourishment, and how you can bring it into harmony, into balance, provide resources, and even what are we attracting in terms of live animals to fend off those known pests. So bringing in or attracting bats or owls or certain bird types based on what you're growing. And so it's, and so this goes down to then what flowers and placement of flowers or other edible or attractive things to, again, other live sentient beings that when we call them in for the right purpose, they really do come online to help. And it really is, all of us serving each other that allows for this creation of food that is unparalleled in my belief in it, how it shows up vibrationally and more, and what it allows us to show up as. So, yeah.
As you're speaking, Lindsaya, I'm imagining the opening scene to Lion King and the circle of light and Elton John on the piano as he's playing it, and the sun is rising, and and it's I'm making a joke, but it doesn't have to be a joke. It doesn't.
That is like when I close my eyes, the funny thing is the dinner table conversation tonight was, because the kids had some friends over, and what was your favorite Disney movie? And Lion King was one of mine. And so when I was talking about it, like, as I was closing my eyes, I was thinking, like, it is the circle of life. That's the best analogy of what regenerative farming is set out with its intention to do. And it is, the other thing is that we believe regenerative is the name forward. I like to tell people this is like our awareness of it right now, but we don't have to look back very far to see that this is how humans behaved. Like, we don't even have, it's not even very, like, we're talking 100 years, 150 years, our ancestors were doing this. So, and then for hundreds and thousands of years before that. So it's really within this last 100 years, we're like a toddler who's trying to walk, but falling on our face. We're just very unbalanced.
Yep. Could not, I mean, again, so much in there and so much we could go off and so many other little tangents, but it's true. And I think I don't want to be controversial here, but I think there is a programming element of this where we feel like that place that you were just talking about, that ecosystem, that beautiful web of interconnectiveness is a fairy tale that only exists in The Lion King, right? That only exists in a Pixar movie that we put on the screen, but it's not reality. Reality is this ecosystem. Reality is a farm that is not depleted after you grow the produce in it. Reality is a farm where there are animals and plants and humans working together to produce vitality, right? That is what it means to be. I often talk about this, Lindsaya, being a holistic human in my health, right? Being mindful of my emotions, being mindful of my nutrition, being mindful of my movement. But it doesn't stop there. That holistic nature, it doesn't stop with the individual. If we decide for it to be so, it spreads outwards, right? It spreads outwards into the environment, into the people that we're around. And I could not have set up this tangent any better here, Lindsaya. I have two more questions left for you, but this is one of them, right? And you are a powerful example of what it looks like to build community around you, right? You have your own loving light that you are using to help other people, and at the same time expanding the tribe, in which in turn helps even more people. So I'm wondering, Lindsaya, with this whole talk that we've had today with food and organic produce and vitality and the soil and nutrients, where do you think building a community around you fits into this all? Where does this fit into it?
Well, for me, a community fits into it. One, I told you I was an only child. And so the reality is that I have been calling in community my whole life because I know that I know its value. I know how much more is done when done together. And I know because it kind of makes me tear up. I know what it is to live alone, and I know we're not meant to. We are meant to spend time alone, but there can be too much for sure. And so, I didn't even know this was going to bubble up. This is wonderful. This is wonderful and beautiful. I'm so grateful for it.
And Lindsay, just sorry to interrupt you. And I feel it too, right? I think it's a big part of what's happening in the world at the moment, right? It's just for people listening, we're recording this, start of 2022, everything's happening in Europe, everything's happening with COVID. We're speaking about the collective and how we're connected to everything. I don't think that's a coincidence. Sorry. Keep going, Lindsay.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I, just so many beautiful awarenesses just came forth right there, and just so much gratitude in the whole process. And so, community for me, first off, I've never felt that I was meant to be the only teacher. And so I've always wanted to be in the place in which I put myself in rooms in which I'm the one that knows the least. And so I strive to surround myself with people who are just walking in ways in which I idolize. And I don't say that from a place of lack. I say that from a place of desire to learn, like desire to embrace more of that, or that are beautiful reflections of what I want to see more in myself. And so because we're tribal by nature, I mean, again, I go back to, we don't have to look far to look at what has changed so significantly. And maybe that's where some of this brokenness is coming from, right? Or, some of this elevation that we're going through right now is because of this consciousness of waking up that we're not serving ourselves in a lot of ways. And so to me, community is the way in which we really create a collective elevation, where we create a greater understanding, because to shift and do things differently, it will take a community. We can't do it as one. It will take, it begins with one, but it has to move through, or it will simply end there. And so to me, for me, that is what wellness is all around, like to be well in all the areas of our life, to give honor and space and create awareness around each one.
I don't want to add anything to that, Lindsay. I thought that was beautiful. And I thought that, this highlights, I'm very happy that you brought up the innate nature of us as being in tribes, right? Because you go back to that same time frame that you were talking about before with the biodynamic living and the regenerative living. At that time, with the farm, with that type of produce that was created, we were also living in that sort of communal system, right? That communal system where if we had something that we were moving through, right, it's so easy for us to see that the way that we live now is the normal, but it's really not, right? We're not meant to live in these homes where, just for me, Lindsay, I live by myself, right? And it's very me. I'm abnormal from the standard of what we've been living for the most of our evolutionary history. Me living by myself, that's a sickness in many ways. I don't want to project that onto anyone, but it's abnormal, right? What is normal is for me to be surrounded by other beautiful souls that, I don't need to, and I want to be careful here, I don't need to rely on them, but they're there for me when I need them, right? They're there for me when stuff comes up like you just experienced in your beautiful heart, and you have this pull to share it with someone, there's someone there, right? And I think that's what it means to be human. That's why the spiritual being inside of us is here having this human experience, because there's something in that emotional tangibility and the sharing of it that makes this all worth it in many ways.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I was just soaking that in. As humans, it is my belief that we come here for this human experience, and the taste, the smells, the touch, the things that we know. And isolation is, again, I don't think that positivity breathes in isolation for eternity, but it doesn't mean never. To be alone and to be with self is something that's very important as well. So that's the power of community to me. And I wholeheartedly, yeah, you're just on that. I'm it just, Oh, something woke up in me. Thanks,
Yep.
Harrison.
You're welcome. I felt it. There's a reason I had to get that question in. Lindsaya, I have to bring this to a close, but before I do, I want to ask you one more question. And just quickly before I get to that, I know you have a lot of things going on in the world, and what I'll do is, you as the listener, if you've been pulled to Lindsaya's words, you've been pulled to her heart, you've been pulled to her mission, I'm going to put all of her details in the show notes, and you can reach out to Lindsaya. And she always has things going on from her Facebook community, from her Clubhouse community, from the challenges and the work that she does in the world. So please reach out to this beautiful friend. And I'm not just saying that as someone who's got to spend a lot of time with her. I'm saying that as someone, as you've been listening to, who knows how deeply and profound and in fact impactful this person is. So follow that feeling, follow that pull, see the show notes. Lindsaya, my last question for you is the mission of this podcast is to help people connect into their deep space of cosmic love so they can share that cosmic love with everyone outwards. So I want to ask you here, what is your definition of that LOVE word?
SELF. As my definition of love, because to me, what I have come to understand is that to love ourselves at whatever level we love ourselves is the highest level we can love others. And so as we want to pour love out into this world, love for me begins with self. And that is our greatest task we are called to in this life. And it is through truly doing that action that we are our ultimate visions and versions of love in this world. So it's self for me.
What a beautiful way to end this roller coaster of a conversation, Lindsaya. I thank you so deeply, my friend. It's been so nice to connect with you in general on this podcast, but thank you for coming on to this episode. I love you very much. I want to say thank you to all the listeners who've joined us today. This has been another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. I'm wishing you all a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I love you very much. Lindsaya loves you very much. And we're out. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, MEAGHER.